5 bells. Stand by all stations.
Attention, all districts. A 5-alarm fire. 5 bells. Move in immediately.
That's it. Let's roll!
Let's go! Firefighters! Presenting Firefighters, the true-to-life story of our unsung heroes who stand ready to ride by day or night against our most murderous enemy, the demon of fire. In just a moment, we'll join Chief Cody and rookie fireman Tim Collins in the town of Plum Valley, where they have joined with their host, the editor of the local paper, in his fight to make the people realize their desperate need for basic firefighting equipment and trained men. A long series of fires, started through ignorance or carelessness and allowed to get out of control because of an inefficient volunteer system, has put many people on Tom Culpepper's side, but not the all-important president of the town council, who seems blind to the danger facing the town. Well, the fight is in the open now, as you'll see, right after the following message. Let's go, firefighters! Let's get over to that house where the crowd had rushed when a small porch fire had broken up the meeting of the town council. Editor Tom Culpepper had proved his point about trained firefighters when his friends Chief Cody and Tim Collins had gotten the fire out before Turner Lawson and his volunteers had even arrived. But now, as the crowd breaks up, it's obvious to Tom that no amount of reasoning or example will change the stubborn opposition of the president of the town council. The chief and Tim stand by uneasily as their friend makes his declaration of war.
I believe the average citizen of this town sees the need we face for decent safeguards against fire, Lawson.
Suppose you leave that to me, Culpepper.
Yeah, but you're supposed to represent the people. Not that I think you do any longer.
And what do you mean by that?
I'm going to suggest they throw you and your whole slate out of office on Election Day, day after tomorrow.
So, you think you can threaten me?
Oh, no, not at all. In this country, we have a choice of candidates, whether you like it or not.
My opponents don't stand a chance, Culpepper.
Well, we'll see. He's going to support my stand for fire equipment, 3 paid firemen, and trained volunteers.
All right, Culpepper, go ahead and fight me. I think you'll regret it. Yes, and these 2 friends you've brought in to interfere. I think you'll all regret it.
Oh, brother, that guy really sounds sore.
I agree with Tim. Will he cool off, Tom?
No, Chief Cody, he won't. He's a tough customer.
Well, as long as we believe in what we're fighting for.
Right. But I hate to drag you 2 into my fight.
Oh, don't worry. This is our fight, too, huh, Tim?
Oh, yes, sir. If we can help make Plum Valley a safer place for people to live, we'll stick to the end, sir.
Oh, thanks. I don't have any doubts we'll win, but, well, I would feel a lot more comfortable if I knew what Turner Lawson was going to do next.
But by the next morning, editor Tom Culpepper has room for nothing in his mind but the campaign which must be fought in the next 24 hours before the election. Once again, the living room of his home is serving as the editorial office for the burned-out Courier. As he writes, he frequently consults with Chief Cody. Both men are so intent on the job ahead, Turner Lawson's threats are quite forgotten for the moment.
Yeah, okay, Chief. If this doesn't cover the situation in a way that'll make people think I don't know what will.
Yeah, you've reviewed every fire in town for the past year, huh?
And pointed out how unnecessary most of them were. Right up to the Hancock block the day before yesterday.
The thing to stress there is, if it had been properly handled, it wouldn't have rekindled and burned your plant.
Yeah, I also stressed the shocking fact not a single volunteer was on hand to save my place.
And it's hard to tell which you folks need most, organization or equipment.
Oh, we need both. And we're going to get them. Now, let's get on to that editorial. This is your baby, Chief. You're the authority.
Well, I spent part of yesterday poking around town.
Well, let me draw up a list. And naturally, we need a fire truck that'll do the job. Whatchamacallit?
A pumper.
Yeah, pumper.
And one that will step up the pressure enough to give you a real stream of water. It's either that or a new gravity water tank for the town. You can't put out a fire with a trickle of moisture.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I want. Now, what else?
Well, you mentioned how important the Cotter Tool Company was to the life of Plum Valley, Tom.
Yeah?
Now, if you don't get larger water mains out in that section, you'll have trouble someday. Mark my words.
Chief Cody, can I see you a minute, sir?
Why, sure, Tim. Well, hello, Luther.
You remember Luther drove the fire truck to your plant when it was on fire the other night, Tom?
I sure do. Wish we had a dozen volunteers like him.
I'm not a volunteer, Mr. Culpepper. I'd like to be, but my job driving a truck took me out of town too much.
Oh, of course. But now, if you don't mind, the chief and I are kind of busy.
Well, wait a minute, Tom. We need the point of view of young fellows who take an interest in firefighting.
I'm afraid interest is not enough, Chief. Our volunteers need training.
Yeah, granted, but don't forget your experience. Seeing they turn out for alarms is just as important.
I figure you could fix that easy enough, sir.
Yeah, how?
Pay them a little something for their work, but base it on each fire they turn up for.
I think that's a darn good idea, Chief. It's hard, dangerous work, and they ought to be paid.
How about that, Tom? Looks like you're going to see your ID in print, Luther.
I was thinking, Chief, a town this size could afford a regular driver, a man stationed at the fire barn regular hours, someone who could be trained to direct the volunteers.
If Tom's plan goes through, why not?
And I've got an idea Luther'd be just the man for the job, sir. I'd be willing to spend some time working with him.
But Luther's got a job, son.
No, sir. That's what we came in to tell you. I've been fired.
What? Turner Lawson fired you?
Hey, you do work for the president of the town council, don't you?
I did, Chief Cody, but he found out I helped him deliver Mr. Culpepper's newspaper after the fire.
You remember, Tom, it had that bang-up editorial in it calling folks out to the town meeting?
Yeah, but this is no way to get back at me.
Well, he knows I agree with what you're trying to do.
Well, that's still no excuse. You've got a right to your opinion.
Yes, sir, and if you ask me, it's a pretty low trick.
It's certainly not a very fair way to fight back. Well, you wondered what Mr. Lawson would do when you said your paper was coming out for his opponent in the election tomorrow.
Yeah, but this is so petty. Lawson's a tough man to buck. I knew that. But to stoop to something like this, I wish there was something I could do, Luther.
Oh, I'll get another job.
If we win in the election and the new town council appropriates money for decent fire protection, Luther, we'll see what we can do about Tim's suggestion.
I can't think of anything I'd like better than being a fireman, but the town's a lot more important than me.
Well, you're a good lad. I think I'm a lot madder about this than you are. Well, we'll fight all the harder now, eh, Chief?
Right. And we won't use tactics like this to win either,
Right.
Tom.
Are you an expert on politics as well as fires, Chief Cody?
Mr. Lawson, how long have you been standing in the doorway?
Long enough, Collins. Door was open, Culpepper, and I thought I'd drop in and see how your campaign was coming.
Read all about it in the Courier when it comes out, Lawson. When I get through with you, you'll wind up with one vote, your own.
You don't say. You, Luther, you're planning to deliver papers today?
Yes, sir, if Mr. Culpepper wants me to.
I've been thinking it over, Luther. If you'll admit you've been misled, I might take you back.
I figure this town needs fire protection more than I need a job.
If I was convinced that was in the town's best interest, Luther, don't you think I'd be the first to vote funds for that purpose?
No, sir. I think you're a penny pincher from way back, and I ought to know. I worked for you.
Son, you do my heart good. And now, Mr. Lawson, if you don't mind, we've got a newspaper to get out.
I thought your plant burned down, Culpepper.
It could have been saved, Mr. Lawson, if your town council had taken the action it should.
Now, take it easy, Tim. Mr. Lawson's got a lot to learn. I hope he doesn't discover his mistake too late.
He'll discover it tomorrow after the election, Chief. You see, Lawson, some people around here have got a sense of fair play. Al Jenkins in the next town is mostly a competitor of mine.
I know. I talked with him a few minutes ago.
Well, then you know he's letting me print a make-up edition of the Courier in his plant for the time being.
I know he was.
What do you mean?
Al's discovered his presses are all tied up today. Will be until after the election.
No, he wouldn't do this to me.
He did seem to regret it a good deal more than I expected. But it so happens he's pretty heavily in debt to me, Culpepper. He didn't have much choice in the matter.
Mr. Lawson, I'm forced to say I think it would be a good thing for this town if you were defeated.
Sorry to disappoint you, Chief Cody. I won't be now. You'll be interested to know, however, that I'm taking your advice about our volunteers. I personally am going to reorganize our system.
Well, don't tell me you're going to train them, too.
Train them, Collins? What's so difficult about putting out a fire?
I'm afraid that's a dangerous attitude, Mr. Lawson. I hope you're willing to take the responsibility the first time you find out how difficult it can be.
I am, Chief Cody. I am. Good day, gentlemen.
Well, there goes my dream of a decent fire department.
Oh, come now, Tom, you're not giving up.
No. We'll do the best we can, but I was counting on the Courier to give the voters the facts. That way I was sure they'd draw their own conclusion. See what was best for the town.
Yes, sir. There's no way we can get that paper out now?
No, Tim, not in time. Lawson's won this round.
All right, Tom. Maybe we'll take the next one.
Yeah, right now I don't see how, Chief. It looks to me like we're stuck. Yes, sir. Really stuck.
Is the fighting editor really licked? Or is there still some way the true interest of Plum Valley can be served? To learn what happens before the all-important election, be sure to listen to the next true-to-life episode of The Firefighters. In a moment, Fire Chief Cody will tell you, boys and girls, how you can help the firefighters in your own town. But right now, let's listen to this message. And now, Chief Bob Cody with a special message for the Firefighters Brigade. Chief Cody.
Hello, boys and girls. Thinking back on that trip Tim and I took to Plum Valley has reminded me that you and your folks probably get away from home once in a while, too. The chance of your running into all the trouble we did is pretty slim. But since we all believe in safety first, here are a couple of rules to keep in mind when you stay at a hotel. First, check all the emergency exits nearby, just in case. Then read the instructions to guests that you'll find posted in your room. And be as careful about causing fire as you are in your own home. That way you're prepared, and you're thinking of others, too. Next time, I'll give you some suggestions about what to do in case fire does break out when you're traveling. Until then, so long.
Fire Chief Cody and the young rookie fireman Tim Collins will be back on the same station the next time you hear... That's it. Let's roll! Let's go! Firefighters is a copyrighted feature of William F. Holland Productions.
Five bells. Stand by all stations.
Attention, all districts. A 5-alarm fire. 5 bells. Move in immediately.
That's it. Let's roll!
Let's go! Firefighters! Presenting Firefighters, the true-to-life story of our unsung heroes who stand ready to ride by day or night against our most murderous enemy, the demon of fire. In just a moment, we'll join Chief Cody and rookie fireman Tim Collins in the town of Plum Valley, where they have joined forces with editor Tom Culpepper in order to get basic fire equipment and train volunteers, which the community needs so desperately. When the chief's attempt to present his findings to the town council had been prevented by its president, Turner Lawson, the fighting editor had come to a decision. The people would have a chance to express their will on this matter at the coming election. With new candidates for the council squarely behind his campaign for fire safety, Tom had set out to defeat Mr. Lawson. Only he hadn't anticipated the methods this man would use to fight back, as you'll see right after this message. Let's go, firefighters! Let's join Chief Cody and Tim Collins in the living room of editor Tom Culpepper's home, which is serving as his editorial office since his newspaper plant burned the other day. Fortunately for Tom's plan to defeat Turner Lawson in the election tomorrow, a fellow editor in the next town is letting him use his presses for the all-important edition of the Courier today. Well, our friends have been working hard to present all the facts fairly and squarely to the voters, and that's why they're stunned casually.
Thought I ought to tell you, Culpepper, your friend Al has suddenly discovered his presses are all tied up today. Will be until after election.
Why, that's impossible, Lawson. He wouldn't do this to me.
He did seem to regret it, but he happens to be pretty heavily in debt to me, my friend. He didn't have much choice in the matter.
Mr. Lawson, I'm forced to say I think it would be a good thing for this town if you were defeated.
Without Culpepper's newspaper to repeat this meddling nonsense of yours, Chief Cody, I won't be.
This is just about as mean as your firing my friend Luther because he tried to help us.
You and my ex-employee will be delighted to know, Collins, that I'm personally going to reorganize our volunteer system of firefighting.
Well, don't tell me you're going to train them, too.
Train them? What's so difficult about putting out a fire?
That's a dangerous attitude, Mr. Lawson. I hope you're willing to take the responsibility the first time you find out how difficult it can be.
I am, Chief. I am. Good day, gentlemen.
Well, there goes my dream of a decent fire department.
Oh, come now, Tom. You're not giving up.
There's no way we can get that paper out in time so the voters have all the facts.
No, Tim. It looks to me like we're stuck. Really stuck.
Now, look, Tom. I know you were counting on that one thing to turn the tide to what we believe is right in this election. But you've had a whole series of fires in Plum Valley. It hasn't been any secret. People know about them.
Well, that's true, Chief, but the lesson behind them has to be dramatized, brought home to them in some way. You said yourself, people always think fire will strike at the other fellow.
I suppose most of them have voted for Lawson and his henchmen so long they'll do it again out of habit.
I don't believe that, Tim. If they can be made to see the need for good roads, they can be made to see the need for everyday precautions against fire. And when they do, they'll defeat a man as short-sighted as Lawson any day.
All right, Chief, but how can we help them to see that?
Well, I don't know. What did they do before newspapers and radio?
Didn't they used to have town criers who spread the news
By thunder. Why not? By word of mouth.
You mean we should make speeches?
Of course, all day. Whenever we get 3 people together.
Well, that's a bit out of our line, Tom.
Yes, you read my mind, son. You read my mind.
Just tell them what you feel this town needs from your own experience, Chief. You're honest and sincere. That's all that counts.
Well, I sure enough don't want to let you down.
Well, then it's settled. I'll pick the spots. We'll cover more ground working separately. And by the time this day is over, Chief Cody, you'll be an expert at public speaking.
Either that or I'll be so hoarse I can't speak at all.
And so the strangest campaign in the history of Plum Valley started. Wherever a few people got together throughout the day, suddenly one of our 3 friends would appear from nowhere. Perhaps it would be Tom Culpepper, bubbling over with excitement.
You want to know what got me fighting mad? Why, sure, it was a personal thing. Why not? I built the Courier up from nothing. And most of you read it whether you agreed with my editorials or not. But when my plan and all the work it represents was burned down because not a single volunteer fireman turned up, that was too much. And listen, why did my place catch fire? Because the Hancock block had burned to the ground just before. And what volunteers we do have didn't have the experience to make sure it was really out and it rekindled hours later. I wouldn't have the nerve to stand here now if most of you hadn't heard me begging for fire precautions, equipment, and training for years before this hit me. And if we don't have sense enough to do this job, then I'll go right on hollering for years to come.
Or perhaps in another part of town at that moment, Chief Cody would be saying in his calmer fashion,
I'm more of a hand for action than talking, but I do know one thing, folks. There's no amount of money in the world can make up for one life lost in a fire. And I found most of your fires are unnecessary. If, like Mr. Lawson, you want to look at it as a matter of dollars and cents, why, a fraction of money lost in property that's gone up in smoke would buy the equipment you need. To say nothing of a safer feeling in your mind when you go to bed at night.
By evening, our friends were hoarse and tired, and far from sure whether they had made their points or not. But evidently, Turner Lawson also had his doubts, for after dinner, a sound truck pulled up before the fire barn. And now, as the chief and Tim sit with Tom Culpepper in his car, they hear the president of the council saying,
By now, most of you folks must be awful tired of listening to the nonsense that's been spread around town today. Lucky we didn't have a fire. All the hot air Tom Culpepper and his firefighting friends have been giving out with would have spreaded something fierce.
Yeah, he's clever, Chief.
Yeah, but he's not giving them facts.
To conclude, I'm going to admit that there's a grain of truth in what my opponents say.
Very clever.
Our firefighting system does need more efficiency. What business doesn't? But how will electing new, inexperienced men to the council help that? We can handle that little problem without outsiders butting in. And we can do it without throwing the taxpayers' money away on fancy frills like new equipment. Remember that tomorrow.
Good grief, another fire.
It sure is. I'll find out where it is.
Don't get excited, folks. Here's a chance to see your own volunteers in action. Our boys are moving into the fire hall as I speak.
Which happened to be awful handy.
Please move back so you won't be in the way of the truck. I think, folks, we're going to show any strangers that happen to be in town that we can handle our own fires with the best of them.
Oh, for Pete's sake, you'd think he planned this.
Let's go, Chief. It's the Cutter Tool Company.
The Cutter... Yeah, that's bad, Tom, very bad. Let's roll.
Say, I can see the factory now, straight ahead.
No flames visible. Maybe that alarm came soon enough to give us a chance at that, Tom.
I hope so. This hits us where we live.
Employs a lot of townspeople, huh?
No, not only that, Tim. It's the thing that brings business to Plum Valley. The lifeblood of every other business in town. It's got to be saved.
Well, maybe we've got a chance. The fire truck's right behind us. Now, if this is handled right...
Well, I'm counting on you, Chief. Believe me.
I'll do anything that's humanly possible, Tom. But this is the section where I discovered you needed larger water mains.
Oh, does that make this hopeless?
Oh, no, indeed. But it creates a very special problem.
All right, you men. Get that hose out fast and attach it to this hydrant. Let's go.
I don't like to butt in, Mr. Lawson.
Then don't, Chief Cody. Just keep out from underfoot.
Have you gone out of your head, Lawson?
Can more than one man give orders at a fire, Chief Cody?
Certainly not, but...
Then leave this to me. I'm in charge here.
I can't stand here and see you waste time by attaching a line to that hydrant. Now, what you've got to do
Is put the fire out before it gets a start. Into the building, men.
Now, Lawson, listen, I've got to warn you.
Save it, Chief. Thought you'd make political capital out of this fire, eh, Culpepper?
Never in my life, but it looks to me like you are.
Well, getting credit for saving Cotter Tool Plant can't hurt me in tomorrow's elections.
Mr. Lawson, you're making a bad mistake. The mistake of your life.
Kinda counted on being the hero of this little affair yourself, didn't you, Chief Cody?
Chief fights fire every day of his life. It's his business.
This one isn't. Don't you forget it. Get that second hose into play, men. The rest of you, follow me.
Well, perhaps Turner Lawson's confidence stems from the fact that no flames are yet visible in the Cotter Tool Company's plant. And perhaps he's perfectly sincere in his belief that he can handle the situation. But why is Chief Cody so positive the man is making the mistake of his life? Well, you'll find the answer to that when you listen to the next exciting episode of The Firefighters. And now Chief Bob Cody will have a word for all of you boys and girls right after this special message that you'll want to hear. And now Chief Bob Cody with a special message for the Firefighters Brigade. Chief Cody.
Hello, boys and girls. Last time we talked a bit about fire precautions when you're traveling with your family. You've checked emergency exits and read the guest instructions in that imaginary hotel room. Now, what would you do in the event fire did break out? Well, first thing, reach for that room phone and see the manager is notified. Then, supposing the fire is somewhere outside, close the transom at once. Then carefully feel the door. If it isn't hot, you can open it a crack, being careful to hold your head away and brace the door with your foot. I don't have to tell you what the rush of deadly fumes can do. Only when you're sure the hallway is safe do you make for that exit. If it isn't, well, that's what I want to tell you next time. Until then, so long.
Fire Chief Cody and the young rookie fireman Tim Collins will be back on the same station the next time you hear...
That's it. Let's go!
Let's go! Firefighters! Firefighters is a copyrighted feature of William F. Holland Productions.
Five bells. Stand by all stations.
Attention, all districts. A 5-alarm fire. 5 bells. Move in immediately.
That's it. Let's roll!
Let's go! Firefighters!
Presenting Firefighters, the true-to-life story of our unsung heroes who stand ready to ride by day or night against our most murderous enemy, the demon of fire. In just a moment, we'll join Chief Cody and rookie fireman Tim Collins at what, in the chief's opinion, is the most serious fire the town of Plum Valley has suffered yet. And because of inadequate equipment and untrained volunteers, the town has had a lot of fires. This fact had caused the two firemen to help their host, Editor Tom Culpepper, in his long campaign for safety against fires. And it has now reached the point where everything depends on defeating Turner Lawson, president of the town council, in the election tomorrow. You'll see an example of this man's stubborn refusal to face the town's desperate need in just a moment, right after the following message. Let's go, firefighters. Let's get out to the Cotter Tool Company plant at the edge of town, where Chief Cody, Tim Collins, and Editor Tom Culpepper had raced when the fire bell sounded. The men were tired after a day of constant talking to the voters, trying to bring them the facts behind the need for fire prevention and control. Now, you'll recall that when Tom's presses were lost in a previous fire, the fighting editor had borrowed those in the next town to continue his editorials against the do-nothing town council. That is, he had, until Turner Lawson stopped it and left him helpless to present the facts. And now, at the fire, Lawson has taken over once again.
No flames from the factory yet. Looks like we'll have this under control in no time. All right, you men. Get that hose attached to the hydrant.
Mr. Lawson, I don't like to butt in, but...
Then don't, Chief Cody. Just keep out from underfoot.
Have you gone out of your head, Lawson?
No, Culpepper, I haven't. Can more than one man give orders at a fire, Chief?
Well, certainly not, but...
Then leave this to me. I'm in charge here.
I can't stand by and see you waste time with that hose. Now, what you've got to do
Is put the fire out before it gets a start. Okay, into the plant now, men.
Lawson, listen, I must warn you.
Save it, Chief. You and your editor friend thought you'd make political capital out of this fire, huh?
Never in my life, but it looks like you're trying to.
I'll prove our firefighting setup is as good as anyone's, Culpepper. The truck's here, isn't it? The volunteers?
Pure luck this time, and you know it.
Never mind that, Tim. Handle this yourself, and you're making the mistake of your life, Lawson.
Getting credit for saving the Cotter Tool Company can't hurt me in tomorrow's election. If you ever stood a chance of beating me, you don't now. Get that second hose into play, you men. The rest of you, follow me.
Now I see what that guy is up to, Chief. He'll play the hero, win the election, and Plum Valley will be just as bad off as it ever was.
Looks like he might pull it off, too, Tim. From out here, it doesn't look like the fire amounts to much.
You're wrong, Tom. The danger of a fire is in direct ratio to the way you start to handle it.
Yeah?
Now, look about you. I don't say it's the volunteers' fault, actually.
Yeah, if they had training, they wouldn't be running around every which way, getting in each other's way, duplicating jobs.
They're having an awful time hooking up that second hose.
Oh, they need more practice. Oh, wait a minute. Not only that, they're using the wrong size coupling.
Oh, good.
Tim!
Yes, sir. I'll give him a hand with that.
I don't care what Lawson said. You've got to help, Chief.
Of course, I'll do what I can, but I have to warn you there's bad trouble ahead if it's got to start inside.
I'd like to take a look at it, see what I can do.
All right, run along. Tim and I will get a couple of extinguishers from the truck and join you. Now, as soon as you're through there, Tim, I'm going over to the truck.
Yes, sir. They're getting the line ready for action now. Oh, say, look at that, Chief. They didn't bother to take a single axe inside with her.
Hook one in your belt. I'll take another.
Yes, sir.
Break out those chemical extinguishers, son.
Yes, sir. Didn't they ever hear of chopping your way through for ventilation and it... Hey.
Huh?
Isn't this the same extinguisher we used when Tom's newspaper office burned?
Let me see. Well, it's the one we tried to use. It was empty.
Yes, sir. It still is,
What?
Chief. And so's this other one.
Oh, that's impossible. I haven't been refilled.
They don't know the meaning of securing.
Oh.
Everything tossed in the truck after a fire. No system, no order.
Well, that's what happens when no one person is directly in charge.
Yes, sir.
Everybody leaves it for the other.
Well, here comes Tom, Chief. He looks scared.
Come quickly, Chief. You've got to take things over in there.
What about Lawson? There's enough confusion already without two men giving different orders.
Yeah, but Lawson sent me. He took one look at that blazing wall in there and hollered for help.
Well, let's hurry. And how do you like that, Chief?
I don't. If the fire's got to start, what kind of a job is that hose doing he took in, Tim?
The weakest stream of water you ever saw. I don't think they know how to open the valve full or something.
Well, we'll quickly fix that.
I'm afraid it isn't the line, Tim.
No?
Remember I inspected this section of town the other day?
Oh, the water mains. Yes, I'd forgotten.
Well, I hadn't. Without larger water mains, you'll never get the stream you need. Without an efficient pumper, you won't get the pressure.
Yeah.
We got a bad time ahead.
Yeah.
Well, as usual, Chief Cody knew what he was talking about. A few minutes later, even the greenest volunteer can see what they're up against.
Tim, let one of those other boys take the axe. Ventilation isn't going to do much good now. You grab that hose.
Yes, sir. If you could call it that.
It'd be a lot more help if they weren't using it to spray the flame.
Yes, sir. Here, Bud, let me show you, will you? Now, look, always directed at the base of the flame.
It still won't do the job, Chief. It's just a drop in the bucket. It's getting impossible to work here.
You, Lawson, stop standing around with your mouth hanging open. Smash that window beside you. Let out some of these fumes.
Well, if it's too late for the Chief to save this plant, Lawson, you and I are going to have a little get-together.
That's right. Try to blame this on me, Culpepper.
I'm not the one to judge, but by thunder, I'm going to see that the people have that chance.
It was to come sooner than anyone, except perhaps Chief Cody, expected. With the walls weakened by fire, there was soon nothing he could do but order the men out. By the time the roof collapsed, word had spread all over town that the Cotter Tool Company was a total loss. By midnight, Tom Culpepper's living room was the scene of much activity, with phones ringing and people coming and going.
Tom Culpepper speaking. Yeah. All right, Bill. If you've got your committee of workers from the plant together, bring them on over. Yeah, Lawson's right here with me now. Oh, you don't have to tell me what this will mean to you fellas in the way of unemployment. There's a committee of businessmen here now. They know that the business the plant brought to town was the lifeblood of this community. Sure. It's about time everybody got together on fire prevention. Well, get on over. So long.
Look here, Culpepper. If you're going to try to saddle me with the responsibility for that fire...
You're in no way to blame for its starting, Lawson.
Well, thanks for nothing.
But some of the men in this room saw you push aside Chief Cody, a man qualified to handle that situation.
Let me ask the chief a question. He's fair. He'll try to be impartial in this.
I'm not impartial about seeing that this town gets equipment and knowledge to handle any more fires, Lawson.
True. But tell me, in front of these witnesses, was there anything you could have done at the start that I didn't do?
In theory, yes. You see, I knew your water mains out there weren't large enough to cope with the problem.
And don't forget, Mr. Lawson, the chief warned you about that at the town council meeting.
That's true, Tim. Knowing that, neither Collins or I would have wasted time. Let the fire get a start by hooking up a weak weapon like your hose.
The chief's explained to all of us, Lawson, that the thing to do was to get in there at once with the chemical extinguishers and axes.
Well, it might have done the trick. It might not. I was perhaps a bit hasty in taking charge.
You sure were. It's going to cost you the election.
Now, look here. I don't like your methods, Culpepper.
And I don't like yours. Stopping me from getting out an edition of the Courier, giving the folks facts to make up their minds in the election tomorrow.
You're not going to use me for a goat. You don't stand a chance of defeating me at the polls. I'll never throw away the taxpayers' money on firefighting frills, and that's that. Not fair to blame me for that fire.
Well, that's perfectly true, Tom.
I thought you were on my side, Chief Cody.
I am. I believe in what you stand for, Tom. But even if Lawson had the knowledge and training, it wouldn't have helped.
Yeah, we've got to admit that the chemical extinguishers wouldn't have saved the plant. They were empty.
Now, let's face it, Tom. Every man in this room, in the whole town, is to blame.
Well, now, there you are, Culpepper.
If you, as citizens, are satisfied with inadequate equipment, with carelessness and ignorance in handling it, well, you're ignoring the danger of more fires in days to come.
We can't afford new equipment, trained men.
You can't afford to be without it. No town can.
And as for training, that's not expensive. And with it, your volunteers can do the job they're supposed to.
The only real blame attached to you, Lawson, is in being blind to the situation. I think Tom Culpepper will admit you share that with a good many others.
But if only they'd wake up to that, Chief. If they'll only put into office tomorrow a town council that is wise enough to look ahead, to see our needs.
They'll put us right back in office as they always have.
Well, you don't have much faith in the people's judgment, Lawson. I think they learned a lesson tonight. Not that you were responsible for the factory being destroyed, but that they were.
You don't win elections by accusing the voters, Chief.
You don't seem to understand. But the folks of this town do right now. I'm sure of that. And I think you'll find it out when the votes are counted.
Is the chief right in his belief? Will tomorrow bring future security against fire to Plum Valley? Or will it be the same story all over again? Well, tomorrow will be an exciting day for our friends, so don't miss the next true-to-life episode of The Firefighters. In a moment, Chief Cody will be back for a word with all of you boys and girls. But first, a message you'll want to hear. And now, Chief Bob Cody with a message for the Firefighters Brigade. Chief Cody.
Hello, boys and girls. You remember last time we talked about precautions while traveling. We found ourselves in an imaginary hotel facing an imaginary fire. We checked carefully and found the hall unsafe for getting to the exit. Now, if you ever face that situation, the next step would be to stop up any openings or cracks by which smoke could enter with wet towels, sheets, blankets, and so forth. Then open the window slightly and stay near it. You know as well as I do how fast a modern fire department is on the job and ready for rescue. Well, that's all for now. Till next time we meet, so long.
Fire Chief Cody and the young rookie fireman Tim Collins will be back on the same station the next time you hear...
That's it. Let's roll!
Let's go! Firefighters is a copyrighted feature of William F. Holland Productions.
Five bells. Stand by all stations.
Attention! All dis... 5 bells. Move in immediately.
Let's go! Firefighters! Presenting Firefighters, the true-to-life story of our unsung heroes who stand ready to ride by day or night against our most murderous enemy, the demon of fire. In just a moment, we'll join Chief Cody, Tim Collins, and their country editor friend, Tom Culpepper, in the editor's living room, right after they've been talking to a committee of businessmen and a group of people employed by the Cotter Tool Company. Both these groups are seriously affected by the disastrous Cotter Company fire, a fire that leveled the town's only industry, throwing men out of work and threatening business for the merchants. Editor Culpepper's answer to all this is to see that Turner Lawson, the town council president, who doesn't believe in what he calls fancy firefighting frills, that Turner Lawson is defeated in tomorrow's election. Well, we'll learn just how successful Tom Culpepper's campaign is right after this important message. Let's go, firefighters! Let's go to the living room of the fighting editor, Tom Culpepper, where he is sitting with Chief Cody and Tim Collins, much disturbed by the events of the day. It is late at night, on the eve of the fateful election, in which editor Tom Culpepper hopes the people of Plum Valley will rally to his cause, go to the polls, throw out Turner Lawson, and elect men who will realize the importance of an efficient fire department for the town. As he sits slumped in a chair, bone-tired from the long day's activity, Tom Culpepper says,
I wonder if there's anything more I can do.
What do you mean, to ensure the defeat of Turner Lawson?
Yeah, it's late, I know, long past midnight, and the polls open at 7 in the morning, but still I wonder if there isn't something.
Well, I'd say you've done everything humanly possible, Tom. You've written editorials, stopped people on the street, talked to committees.
Yes, I know, and right now, before tomorrow's election, and we learn what the people say, I want to thank you both. You've both been wonderful to devote your vacation to this campaign.
We haven't done much, Tom, compared to you. You're the one who's been working night and day.
And right now, with the election just a few hours away, I wonder if it's been enough. Turner Lawson is a strong man in this town, a man people fear. A lot of them will think twice before they vote against him.
Yes, sir, but after today's fire, the Cotter Tool Company burnt to the ground, don't they see now that fire protection, real fire protection, is a must in this town?
Yes, you'd think today's sorry experience would be enough to convince them, but And on the other hand, they know that Turner Lawson, the big man in Plum Valley, is against spending money on fire protection. And a lot of them will vote the way they think Lawson wants them to.
I think you're unduly pessimistic, Tom. After all, people aren't blind to what's best for their own interests. And I claim the Carter fire has opened their eyes.
Well, tomorrow will tell. You men better turn in and get some sleep. You must be dog-tired.
What about you, Tom? Little sleep wouldn't hurt you either.
No. You go up ahead. I'll turn in by and by.
But, Tom, there's nothing more you can do tonight. Don't you think you'd...
You and Tim hit the hay. There's a few more calls I want to make. Folks, I want to tell about tomorrow's election.
But, Tom, it's after midnight. People will be in bed.
Most of them, yes, but there are a few on night shifts here and there. I want to see them. Make sure they turn out to vote and against Turner Lawson.
Leaving the chief and Tim to turn in, Tom Culpepper goes out into the night, campaigning up to the last moment for a fire service that will protect Plum Valley. It is now the next day, the day of the momentous election. Tom Culpepper is haggard and drawn from lack of sleep, waiting for the hour when the votes will be counted. Chief Cody and Tim sit quietly by, trying to be as encouraging and hopeful as possible.
Tom, you're going to have the gosh awfulest bill for shoe leather you ever saw if you don't sit down.
Yes, I know. I'm as nervous as a cat, but I can't help it. What time is it?
5:30, just a half an hour yet.
Half an hour before the polls close. A couple hours or so to count the ballots. Man, this has been a long day.
Well, it can't do any good to worry, Tom. Come on now. Sit down on the steps with Tim and me here and have a cup of coffee.
Oh, thanks. Guess I might as well. Just give me a little cream, no sugar. Thanks. You boys have been mighty helpful today.
I'm predicting your man will win in a walk. Even if Turner Lawson is a big shot in this town, folks are no fools, Tom.
Well, if my man doesn't win and Turner Lawson gets back in as council president, I can tell you one thing.
What's that, Tom?
Tom Culpepper will be washed up in Plum Valley.
Oh, come now, Tom. It won't be that bad. You can still rebuild the Courier and carry on your fight.
No, I'm afraid not. As I see it, this is the most important fight of my life. I've really given everything I've got to convince people that Turner Lawson is no good for them. If they refuse to believe it and still elect him, why, I might just as well pack up and get out of town.
Well, I agree with the chief. I say the people have had enough of Turner Lawson and costly, senseless fires. Why...
Well, I hope you're right, Tim. But if you're not and Lawson gets reelected, he'll do everything he can to run me out of the business. I know him. He's a mean, revengeful man.
Well, the die is cast now anyway. It's in the hands of the voters. And I said... Hey,
What is it, Chief?
voters. That reminds me. You're a voter, aren't you, Tom?
Sure am. Never miss an election. Hey, you're right. Good gosh, I haven't voted yet. What time is it?
10 minutes to 6.
Polls close in 10 minutes. You better get a move on, Tom.
How do y'all like that? I'm so busy telling other people to vote, I forget all about it myself. Where's my hat?
Yes, it is a tough day for Tom, all right, sweating out the election returns. A day which may decide the fate of his future life in Plum Valley. Or as he says, if the townsfolk reject his plea for a new council and better fire protection and re-elect Turner Lawson, it'll be mighty difficult for him to carry on his work in the town. Will Plum Valley stand back of their fighting editor, or will they vote the way Turner Lawson wants them to? The answer to that fateful question Tom Culpepper is about to learn, as 2 hours later, he waits nervously in his living room, staring at the telephone. The chief and Tim are with him.
Yeah, ballots ought to be counted by now. What's holding them up, I wonder?
Oh, take it easy, Tom. Plum Valley isn't the biggest town in the world, but it does take time to sort out the votes.
John Runyon down at the polls said he'd call me just as soon as they learn the results. Maybe the news is bad. Doesn't want to call. Do you suppose?
Oh, it's only been 2 hours, Tom. Give him time.
Time. Seems all I've done today is count the slow, dragging hours. I got it. Hello? Yeah, John. Yeah. All in, eh? Yeah. What? Oh, say that again, John. Wowee! Thanks a million, John.
Hey, you don't have to tell me, I know.
Turner Lawson is defeated
Oh,
by
what-
more than 3-1. It's a landslide for the new council. Jiminy darn, I feel 100 years younger.
Congratulations, Tom. I was sure the
dear.
folks of Plum Valley were on your side.
Oh, 3-1, brother. I'll bet Turner Lawson has a bad night tonight.
And you talking about packing up and getting out of town.
Yeah, well.
Why, you, not Lawson, are the biggest man in town now.
I don't want to be a big man in any town, Chief. I just want to see Plum Valley have, among other things, a fire service that will prevent the awful losses we've suffered in the past. And
Maybe Turner Lawson's demanded a recount.
Oh, don't joke, son. I wouldn't put it past him. Hello? Oh, yes, Bert? Yes, John just called. Yeah, congratulations.
That must be Bert Barton, the newly elected council president.
Yeah? Yep, you did? Oh, that's the stuff. You fellas don't waste time, do you? Oh, say, that's fine. That's great. Yeah, you bet I will. Thanks, Bert. Thanks a lot. Bert Barton, the new president, says right after the results were in, he called an emergency meeting of the new council.
Say, that's action for you.
And the first item of business was Plum Valley's new fire department. They've already authorized a new engine and are meeting tomorrow to authorize the organization of the new firefighting personnel.
Good work. Say, I guess this town is really wide awake now.
And, Chief, Bert has a suggestion. I think it's a good one.
What's that, Tom?
He wants me to ask you if you and Tim would consent to remain in Plum Valley for a while longer and help us organize our new fire department.
Well, what do you think, Tim?
I'd say it was a swell idea.
Good. Then it's settled. We'll begin tomorrow. Wait a minute. Hello? Yeah?
Well, that was a short conversation.
Well, who was it?
Turner Lawson.
Congratulating you?
Hardly that. He said I'd won this round, but that he would ruin me if it was the last thing he did.
In the wake of his joy at winning the election, Tom Culpepper gets an ominous warning from his old enemy, the defeated Turner Lawson. Will he, can he, ruin Tom? And will he try to stop the new council's plans to give Plum Valley a new fire department? We'll learn the answers to these questions in the next true-to-life episode of The Firefighters. In a moment, Chief Cody will be back with a word for all of you boys and girls. But first, a message you'll want to hear. And now, Chief Bob Cody with his message for the Firefighters Brigade. Chief Cody.
Hello, boys and girls. I want to read you a brief news item someone sent me the other day. 4 passengers of a bus were injured, one critically, when the vehicle struck ladder truck number 21 following its response to a false alarm. 4 people hurt because some criminally thoughtless person turned in a false alarm. Now, I know you junior firefighters understand the seriousness of false alarms, but many people do not. You can help the fire department in your town by teaching your friends the grave danger of tampering with fire alarm boxes. False alarms are serious and sometimes fatal business. Help keep them down in your neighborhood, won't you? Well, that's all for now. Till the next time I drop in, so long.
Fire Chief Cody and the young rookie fireman Tim Collins will be back on this same station the next time you hear...
That's it. Let's go!
Let's go! Firefighter!
Firefighters is a copyrighted feature of William F. Holland Productions.